Alright guys, we're in Numbers 22 today. Um, Basically, the children of Israel were in a situation where they had come up against a land called Bashan, and they had prayed that God would give them victory over this people, and He did. And one of the things that I find significant here is that this is in the end of chapter 21. Um, is that once again God sent them back out into the wilderness, but yet He still had this relationship with them. They still pray to Him. He still answered their prayer, and they still had a relationship. So this, just because He sent them back out into the wilderness, it's not God abandoning them. It's not God leaving them to their own devices or anything like that. God said, I'm not going to lead you into rest, not that I'm not going to have a relationship with you. And I think that's significant, and I think that's something that we should focus on. So then we get to chapter 22, and there's a king named Balak, who is from this place called Moab, and he sees that the Israelites are starting to become powerful. They're starting to conquer people in battles, and basically he's afraid and the Moabites are afraid, and so he calls on this guy named Balaam, who is not an Israelite but has a relationship with God, because Balaam is known for basically who he prays to God and curses, they get cursed, and who he prays to God and blesses, they get blessed. And this is not some it's an interesting relationship. You should really read chapter 22 and go through there and see that. But we see that Balaam has a relationship, has an actual relationship. It's not just, you know, he has some sort of magic power or something like this. You know, he's not using sorcery or anything. But he actually has a relationship with God, because he prays to God and he's like, God, you know, the king is asking me to curse these people. What do you want me to do? And God responds to him, you know, thus implying a relationship. The two of them are conversing with one another. And God tells him in verse 12, he says, And God said unto Balaam, Thou shalt not go with them, thou shalt not curse the people, for they are blessed. Now the king had offered Balaam a bunch of money. And, you know, Balaam prayed to God, and God said no, because these are my blessed people. And something interesting kind of happens here, because once the king finds out that Balaam is not going to curse the Israelites, he goes through and basically sends his emissaries back again and says, all right, well, you know, I need you to, you know, tell him I'll give him more money, tell him I'll give him more power, more riches, all this stuff. And they go to him, and Balaam tells him, he's like, look, I can't do any more or any less than what God allows me to do. He tells him that in verse 18. But this is where the kind of justification starts to come in. In verse 19, he says, Now therefore I pray you, tarry ye also here this night, that I may know the Lord's will, or what the Lord will say more unto me. And basically what he's doing is he's saying, look, I can't do anything more than what God says, but I'm going to go back and ask God again. Now here's the thing. Did the situation why God had told him not to curse Israel, did that change at all? You know, God said the reason why I don't want you to curse them is because these are my blessed people. Did that change because the king came and offered him more money? And the obvious answer is no, it didn't. You know, this is a situation where Balaam is being tempted here, and Balaam is actually asking God to bless his will instead of revealing God's will. And Balaam wants the money, he wants the stuff, so he's like, look, I'm going to go back to God and I'm going to ask him again. because now there's more money involved, as if God somehow needs our money. And this was really a case of Balaam being disobedient and wanting to justify his sin. And I know I've done it in the past where I've justified, but it's certainly something that we should kind of take note of, because we see in verse 20, God tells him, "And God came unto Balaam at night and said unto him, If," this is important, "if the men come to call thee, rise up and go with them, but yet the word which I say unto you, that shall you do." So he says, if the people who are staying the night, if they come in unto you, knock on your door, say, "Hey, we want to talk to you again before we head out." If they come unto you, then yes, you can go with them. But if not, then don't. And it says in verse 21, "And Balaam rose up in the morning and saddled his ass and went with the princes of Moab." So again, Balaam disobeyed again. God had told him, if they come back in unto you, then you can go with them, but if they don't, then don't. And Balaam rose up and he went. And this really kind of shows Balaam's heart being towards the money, towards the finances, power, things like this. It wasn't about doing God's will. It was about doing whatever he could do, justifying whatever he could justify to get his own will done. And it says in verse 22, "And God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him." So I'm going to stop this here because this is going to end up being too long, but tomorrow we're going to talk about the angel of the Lord and all that. The thing that's interesting, though, is that God is working certain circumstances in such a way that he tells Balaam, look, if they come in unto you, that's fine, you can go, but if they don't, then don't. And we'll see in tomorrow how God uses other circumstances to try and nudge Balaam into a certain direction and to try and reveal God's will to Balaam. But Balaam is just resistant, and he wants what he wants, and he's going to justify it however he can. So anyway, that was something that I wanted to kind of share with you guys. You guys, if you want to read through chapter 22, it's not real long, but there's a lot in there. So, all right, God bless.